This is a 190 Q&A practice test. Plaintiff Attorney Mr. Long, capital L-O-N-G. Defense Attorney Mr. West, capital W-E-S-T. And we'll start with Defense Attorney. Ready? Here we go. And then there's also other types of spatter, lower velocity, like if there's a beating and someone is bleeding, head jerking back and forth, something like that, right? Yes. And then there's also something called cast-off spatter, right? Yes. And that would occur if somebody is taking a knife, if someone is, let's say, laying on a mattress, a victim is laying on a mattress, a victim is laying on a mattress, and being stabbed repeatedly with a knife. As they come up and down, the knife may cast off blood spatter, right? Yes. And you saw no evidence of that in Mr. Lansing's house, did you? No, I did not. And you saw no evidence of that in Mr. Lansing's garage either, did you? That's right. And none of this low velocity stuff that I talked about that can be from when someone is being beaten either, right? No blood spatter at all in Mr. Lansing's house of any kind, just blood stains, no patterns, right? And those blood stains were scattered, more isolated, right? There was a grouping in the bathroom and then the entry door directly across the hallway from the bathroom. Okay, one spot. I would say the other one on the other door would have been more isolated from those, okay? And the ones on the couch were near the second entry. But for instance, the ones in the bathroom, there's one on the floor, right? Not just one, but several, okay? And also one on the sink, some in the sink, some on the vanity, all right? Consistent with somebody who may have cut their finger or cut themselves shaving in a bathroom, possibly. The ones on the floor and the vanity looked like they had been diluted down with water, so yeah, cut yourself and then cleaned up. Okay, but still there where you could see them, yes. In fact, it was obvious to you that somehow you were informed that all of those had been sampled prior to your arrival on Monday night, September 2nd. No, not all of them. Okay, some of them had though, right? The ones on the entry door in the bathroom had. The one on the floor, none in the bathroom had been sampled yet. Okay, all right. So you identified the ones in the bathroom that had not yet been identified, but the ones had been identified and sampled before, except for the ones on the couch and the second entry door. Well, the ones on the couch you didn't notice that night. I thought that was later. We're just talking about Sunday night for now. Okay, so the ones on the entry door across from the bathroom had been sampled before. The one on the other entry door and the ones in the bathroom had not. Okay, so you went to the entry door of Mr. Lansing's bedroom and looked at that, yes, that area. Did you actually go inside of his bedroom? Yes. Did you see a Toyota key sitting on the floor in plain view? No, I didn't. Did you see a key anywhere in that bedroom on the night of September 2nd? I don't recall seeing any keys. I wasn't looking for keys. You talked about trace evidence as being things like fibers and hairs and those sorts of things, right? That's right. Trace evidence can also sometimes be left just by handling something. True? Sure. If you know, if you are not, if it's beyond your qualifications, just please tell me. Well, you could consider DNA as trace evidence, and that can be left by just handling items. And if somebody uses an item daily, one would expect handling something daily that there would be their DNA left on there, right? Yes, such as a car key. Sure, somebody who had a car key for 5 or 6 years, handling it every single day, if you were to test that in your lab, you would likely find their DNA, wouldn't you? I would think that would be a good possibility, unless somebody had wiped it off, cleaned it up in some way before you got to it, right? Yeah. Okay, now you mentioned that Mr. Ames was with you also on Sunday evening, right? Yes, and his specialty is fingerprints? Yes. Was he asked to look in Mr. Lansing's house to see if there were any fingerprints of note? No, we were sent in mostly to look for blood spatter pattern, but as a fingerprint analyst, when he sees a fingerprint, he will look at it. If someone is wearing gloves, they may not leave fingerprints, right? But if someone is not wearing gloves, they might very well leave fingerprints when they touch items, right? Yes. And for instance, let's go to the Highlander a minute and image that. This is the hood, this desk right in front of you, all right? Okay, to open a hood such as the Highlander, which you know how to do that, right? Well, if it's like my car, you have to pull a lever inside the vehicle, right? Okay, that releases it a little bit. Then you have to reach in under the hood, sure, and release another lever. So then you release another lever, and then your fingers in some way come in contact with the hood as you lift it, right? Right. And let's talk about the tailgate of this Highlander a moment. Okay, you looked at that carefully. Do you want to put up that exhibit for me for a moment, please? It's exhibit 29. You want the one Mr. Drummond looked at, or you want the one Ms. Graves looked at? 29, I think, is Graves, not the crime lab one. Is there a rear view one? Absolutely. 135. That's fine. That would do. Can you locate the handle or the lever that one would use to open that rear tailgate door? I'm not real familiar with that vehicle. I would assume, all right. This one is taken at night. If we might look at 29, please, counsel. Does that give you a little bit better view? I can see the lock there. I would imagine it's built into that area. So if somebody is going to open that tailgate door, they have to put their hands right near the lock lever and in some way pull it open with their fingers, right? That would be the way I would do it. And if they are not wearing gloves, they might leave fingerprints, right? Yes, if they are wearing gloves, they may not leave fingerprints or would not, right? Depending on the type of glove. You can get some surgical gloves where fingerprints do pass through. All right, but if you are wearing gloves, you are also not bleeding all over the place, are you? If you have got a cut on your finger and you are wearing gloves inside of that vehicle, you are not going to be dripping blood into the vehicle, are you? If you are not bleeding enough to soak through the glove and then seep through the glove, sure, if you're bleeding that much, it would be obvious. You would have blood on the steering wheel and everything, right? It's hard to say. I don't know the extent of the bleeding. It would depend what you would touch. Well, if you were bleeding and not wearing gloves inside the vehicle, you would also be touching and operating things like the steering wheel and the whatever else you might be touching, the door handle, that sort of thing, right? Objection, highly speculative. There's just too many variables unaccounted for in that hypothetical. Sustained. You have seen cases where people do leave fingerprints, right? Yes. And they take photos of those, yes. Did you take any photos or see any fingerprints anywhere inside this vehicle? I only looked inside the vehicle through the glass with a flashlight at night. I did not see any fingerprints. And did Mr. Ames process the vehicle at all for any kind of fingerprints? Mr. Ames wasn't at the scene when the vehicle was at the scene. Okay, so there were no fingerprint processing done of the vehicle at that scene, right? That's right. That would have occurred later at the crime lab. Yes. All right. Well, we'll talk with those people later. Going back to Monday, you mentioned that Mr. Ames was with you and you said something about these two other vehicles near the pond that he processed the fingerprints. Do you recall that? He did not process them on Monday. He processed them later. Oh, that's right. You said there was dew on it. There was dew on it. Okay, but there was some blood stains in the other two vehicles, yes. And these are the two vehicles that were junk salvage vehicles, right? Yes, many of which got there because they have been in car accidents, right? I assume so, yes. All right, the word list. Lansing, capital L-A-N-S-I-N-G. Ames, capital A-M-E-S. Highlander, capital H-I-G-H-L-A-N-D-E-R. Drummond, capital D-R-U-M-M-O-N-D. Graves, capital G-R-A-V-E-S. And that is it for the word list, and that will conclude our 190 Q&A practice test.